Well, part of that is when I was listening to the other episode, hearing you say defining the brand directive, which is a map for our culture to achieve our mission and vision, right?
Yeah.
There's an element of we're going somewhere for a purpose. How can we make sure that everyone knows how to head in that direction?
Welcome to the Culture Goodr podcast, a behind-the-shades look at creating and changing culture inside of Goodr sunglasses.
Welcome, everyone, to the Culture Goodr podcast. I'm Stephen Lees, the CEO and co-founder. With me, as always, Shaun. Actually, not always. Sometimes he's not here. But this series, we're talking about our brand directive. And our brand directive is made up of 4 articles. And if you missed the episode where we laid this out, it's episode 85. But simply put, we have our ethos, aspirational. This is why we exist. We have the playbook. This is actionable, how we behave. We have our anchors, foundational, how we'll succeed. And then we have sunglasses, tangible, what we do. Today, we're going to dive into why this came to be. And we will be diving into each of those articles separately in episodes to come. With that being said, Shaun, how are we doing today?
Hey, doing great, thanks. It's good to be back. So one thing I noticed is I was away on leave while you were coming up with this talk, and I was thinking, okay, I'm away for a couple weeks. Something's gonna have changed, by the time I get back, because only constant is change. And sure enough, like I come back and it's like, hey, listen, you're going to need to catch up on this brand directive talk that Stephen just gave. So I'm like scrambling to get my feet under me again. And I realized this is actually perfect because I'm literally made of questions right now about this whole thing. And we have this podcast time. So I could just ask you a bunch of questions about it.
It's funny you say that because when I heard that I was like, oh, Shaun's on leave. That's right. Oh, man, this poor guy's going to have to watch a video of this entire thing. So I appreciate you doing that.
Oh, yeah, no problem. Thanks to Duncan and team for making it a high-quality video. That really helped.
All right, hit me.
So, yeah, right. Okay, so first thing, right, you kind of gave this the tee up in the previous episode, but understanding you're on a plane to Hong Kong or maybe both, and you had this idea, okay, we need to clarify the terms, like literally the words. What do we mean when we say culture, when we say brand, customer, whatever? So just talk through what's that like as you're sitting there. Why is this formulating in your mind? What's becoming clear to you?
It probably started in June. I was on the flight in November, but if I'm being honest and I'm tracing back the kind of data points, we had a big company or a leadership. We do a thing called Fuck to Fix. I'm sure we've talked about it, where different teams get together and we identify something that's fucked and then we create a solution. And this one was around we had 2 marketing teams and this realization that we need to put them together. So we have one united front. And inside of that, I started thinking, I think we can do a better job about internally how we are talking about the customer. And so that's probably the first seed. It was just like, okay, yeah, so we have projects, we're working, a bunch of teams did a lot of great work. So as this is going along, I was also doing an interview. Somebody asked me how I define culture, and I defined it in our definition, which is the shared behaviors, rituals, game plans, and anchors of our team. And I watched their brain almost explode. Never heard it that way. And that was like, oh, man. I wonder how many people inside the building could define it that way. Actually, Stephen, I don't think you've done a good enough job of clearly defining stuff. We are a rocket ship that's moving fast, and that is really fun and exciting. And also, sometimes shortcuts happen, or sometimes I need to do a better job of taking a beat and explaining things, message repeating it. So there's a bunch of numerous things that we're building. And then as I was on that plane to Hong Kong, I love working on planes, and I set aside all the time on both the flights to work on this talk. It's the beginning of the year talk that is all right, here's what we're focusing on. Basically, it's 4 hours marked off. We call it game day, renamed it the Brand Directive because of the topic. But as I was thinking about, okay, what is the best thing for this company? What is the most value I can deliver to this company right now? I started to have a bit of anxiety about, can people with thinking about can everybody define these core things? I know for a fact everybody could rip off our mission of we exist to give you information beyond unabashedly yourself. That's unquestionable. Our values of fun and authenticity, those are unquestionable. But as you get further away, I was questioning it. And like I talked about in episode 85, the one before this, the past year, this amazing and terrifying thing has happened. The brand has swelled. It is past my wingspan. And so how I decided to react to this is, okay, I'm going to start defining every single word. And I mean, it took me 16 hours. Like, it took me both flights, 8 hours on both flights. I just, napped a little bit because I just got really into this. And every time I came to a fork in the road that was unclear, I chose the path, erased the other fork and moved forward. And then as I was going through this and I spun out all these loose ends, Shaun, I realized, okay, you've done this. Now you need to do the service to the brand is repackaging this in a very clear and direct way. And so that was the origin, but the talk changed numerous times from that point.
Yeah, for sure. So what I'm getting there is like you started with words, literally what do we mean when we say something specific, right? But then what the end product contained was actually really like very well buttoned up sort of buckets for things to fit into so that everyone can process, okay, this is what you mean when you say that. But also, these are the areas that I can think, almost like lenses that I can use to look at the world as I think about, okay, our ethos, our game plans, our customer, our product, all those things. So you started with words, but you also ended with like a place for the words to go that kind of buttons things up in one place.
For sure. And if I'm being, there's tons of so much work has gone into this. I'm like, hey, ideas of values from Brene Brown and people like the author of The Advantage, Patrick, his last name is escaping me, Seth Godin. So many people, Simon Sinek, like kind of like the why, how, what. So I want to just offer credit of I'm not a genius that created this. I repackage it for the purpose of our team in a digestible way. But it did just start with words, and I think that people need to be more careful or more intentional about the words they use. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, another side of that too is like you said, how can I be of the greatest service to this brand, right? As you recognize it's outgrowing your ability to stay like super in touch with every single part of it, right? And that's a very normal thing. If a company is healthy and growing, it's going to outgrow its founders' reach and create kind of a life of its own, right? And so as you raise it, it's almost like, I'm not a parent, but it's got to be like parenting in some way where it's like, uh-oh, this thing's talking and walking now. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a parent either, but I jokingly say, well, I'm not a parent, but I have 150 children. They're called the employees of goodr. But yeah, I mean, right? Like I have to trust I've done a good enough job to let this child go to college and make bad decisions. I don't know, but yeah, for sure. There is a lot of that in there. And then this other thing, we had a new onboarding class start in November of last year, so November 23, and was doing a lunch with them and a Q&A, 10 people. I realized some interesting things. One, this is when it was cemented of how much bigger we've gotten as a company. When the CEO of a 10-person company is having lunch too, it's just kind of normal, and then 20 and 30 and 40. But as the bigger we get, I was actually jokingly telling this class this, when I go in there, do I go into these meetings now? There's like what would you like us to do, sir? And it's a weird, I'm like, okay, so I need to make sure that I'm being clear and I'm not putting myself on a pedestal. I'm being accessible. And then I got asked a very interesting thing in there, which also was part of the also kind of helped feel this. Somebody asked me, how does somebody end up like you? I was like, I'm sorry, what? like, why do you care so much about the team and the people? And I'm like, well, it's like, how's a brand end up like goodr? I'm like, it doesn't just end up. It is thousands of things that interact. And so as I was doing this, I was like, oh, how do I strip, in the interest of clearly communicating it? How do I give the appropriate things that people can remember? And then what we'll talk about, I'm sure, as we go on, is the first section was laying out the brand directive. And then I took a couple hours and I walked everybody through year over year of all the things that led to us defining our origin, our mission, our vision, our values, how the anchors came to be. And so that it became very clear to me that I needed to give everybody the proper context. And since we were going to be professionally recording this, it hit me, oh man, if we do this the right way, now we can cut it up. We can use it as part of onboarding. So now, and everybody moving forward who comes into the brand will have seen this talk. And that's a really cool thing to know.
Yeah. So there's this idea of like institutional knowledge, right? When you work at a certain place, you kind of absorb how things work, and there's a value to that, right? So to you, as the CEO of this company that's grown from 3 to 150, why is it so important for everyone to be able to have this understanding of how we define things, how we bucket them, and then sort of like the why we exist, how we behave, all of this stuff? Why is that so important?
It's a great question. I think that there's a lot of answers, but the cleanest answer is one of the hardest parts of my job is keeping 150, 160, 170 plus people moving in the same direction. It is really, really difficult. And so I wanted to create a tip of the spear of like, hey, there's a lot behind this, but if all you know are these 4 articles, we are in this together. If you know and believe in this, we are more united than probably 99% of the companies out there. And so that was really why. And the stronger the brand, the stronger the culture, the more fun, great work we all get to do. But yeah, that piece of keeping us all on the same page.
Yeah. One of the things that you mentioned is really wanting to, at first, to keep goodr as flat as possible, like a totally flat. You dreamed of like a flat organization, right?
Yeah.
But as you grow, you see, oh, that's impossible. You can't have that many people reporting to one person or whatever. But hand in hand with that was the desire for autonomy, to allow people to work autonomously. Now, what you just said feeds pretty strongly into autonomy, right? Giving people the clarity to be creative, giving people the understanding and alignment around directions, shared agreements, all that stuff. So how does that play into your philosophy about how you wanted to form this company in the first place?
Yeah, in my talk, I'm sure we'll get to this, until goodr was like 35 people, we were completely flat. There was no bosses. And then realized, for any number of reasons, I couldn't run it that way. Created AMP, really wanted people to have autonomy and still want people to have autonomy. I think the really interesting thing is all I'm trying to do in a lot of ways now, since goodr is so far out of my control, is I try and hold the highest leaders accountable. Like that is really my focus. And the other then is like, I'm just trying to kind of create a path and just kind of like push people out of the nest. And like, hopefully I have taught them how to flap their wings appropriately. I mean, that's that's kind of all I can do at this point. Otherwise, the work that I need to do is creating the foundation and then trusting people will evolve it appropriately, because this brand, I hope, lasts far beyond me.
Yeah, right. Well, part of that is when I was listening to the other episode, hearing you say defining the brand directive, which is a map for our culture to achieve our mission and vision, right? There's an element of we're going somewhere for a purpose. How can we make sure that everyone knows how to head in that direction together?
Yeah, and that's, and I think the thing that was really, I didn't do it in the previous episode, but I dropped in dozens of customer stories throughout my talk because I think that we all are really close inside this brand and we do this amazing job together. And it's easy to think that we give you permission to be unabashed yourself, which is our mission, is just for us. It's for us and our customers. And so in this and in the vision, right? The vision is creating accessibility for our customers. I really, really want us all to be on the same page and understand that, because I think the moment you as a brand lose track of how important your customers are, you are on a slippery slope, my friend. And I think that's when you see brands go awry and product offerings go awry. They start reading their press clippings and they start thinking they're infallible, and then they end up like Blockbuster Video.
Yeah, right. That's a shift away from understanding that basically numbers are people too, right? Like if you get too focused on the numbers, you forget why are the numbers there in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, numbers are good for goals and they're good for measuring, and they're important for any number of reasons. But if all I actually really care about is process and accountability, if you have the right process and accountability, the numbers stop to being. Usually when I find myself actually anchoring on the numbers, Shaun, it's because we don't have the right process and accountability. So I need to use those numbers to prove a point, which is a slightly different topic, but it is something that is very, very, very real inside of this, creating accessibility, right? I talk very little about numbers per se.
Yeah, well, the reason I'm bringing that up is one of the things I've noticed recently. It's kind of hilarious to think about, but just a shift of like reminding people, hey, we sell a product to a person, and we talk a lot about like holding ourselves accountable and our attitudes and behaviors and beliefs, but like we exist because people buy a product they love from us, right?
100%. Yeah, 100%. And I think the thing that it's hard for our customers, we're an LA-based company. Our customers are far past the LA, and our ability to understand our customers are they are different from us in any number of ways, and they are our customer, and that is really, really important for us to all understand. And also, it's a really cool thing that binds us is that when you might think you don't have anything in common with other people, with people in other parts of the world, and say, well, I mean, if you work at goodr, you have a really cool thing in common because we're pretty prolific in every state. And I don't know, also there's a weird thing of like, cool, just, I know, everybody's just doing their best, and our customers are great. Like they pay for all this. So just understand that.
Right. Yeah. Well, that gets to another kind of core principle that we talk about internally a lot, but it applies equally externally, and that's connection. Right. Ultimately, everything that you're sharing in this brand directive is recognizing it's all people. Product is our culture. Marketing is our culture. Ops is our culture. People are our culture. Customers are our culture. But ultimately, all of that comes down to connections with and between people.
Yeah, I think the danger in that, yes, I agree. The danger in that is one of the other core beliefs of reasons wanting to do this talk is this idea that, in full transparency, I wasn't doing a good enough job of talking about the importance of, operations and marketing to our company. And when I explain it, it's like, hey, we make product for customers. We market to the right product, to the right customers. Our operations team makes the product, gets it to our customers, and all the people make it happen. So yeah, people is uniform and all of it is true. The danger in that is just we need to understand we are a product company that really cares about personal development, not a personal development that tells about product. And so like at its core, right. That is like really, really important, I think, to the overarching theme of this talk of why we're here. And it's not to diminish people. It is to understand that the stronger the brand, the more people, more connection we get to have.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to paint that in the wrong light. I think it's just, it's really interesting that like the misconception was there almost, right? Like we're super focused on personal development, doing things as efficiently and effectively as we can. And the fact that at how many years in we are, like 8, 9.
9.
You're like, just a reminder, product, customers, kind of important to all the things we're doing here. Slight shift, but it's like, okay, that works and helps us to get a little bit more clarity, which the next kind of phase of your talk here, breaking things down into buckets that makes them super clear, right? Ethos, why we exist, the playbook, which is how we behave, anchors, how we succeed, and sunglasses. Like what do we do? What do we sell? Each of those has a thread that's connected to a lot of kind of message repeat points. Like our weekly meeting is a good one where we say, the mantras, fun and authenticity, our values. We make and sell $25 active sunglasses for anyone. So just talk us through briefly, how did you come up with each one of those? Because we had some version of something, right? Fundamentals kind of fit into a place, but as you're going through all this defining, you found these really clear buckets. So how did you go about landing on each of those?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's not as clean as I might like or as salesy. And I will give it high level, knowing that we're going to go really in depth on each 4 of those articles and future episodes. But I think that as I started going through this definition, because at first it was just defining words. It wasn't this brand directive, and it wasn't these buckets. And a couple really interesting things started to come up. I would use a buzzword, then I'd go back and define it. And I realized a couple things. One, in this same area, I think just before maybe Hong Kong, somebody said to me, like, well, like you always said, we're a work hard, play hard company. I'm like, I've never said that a day in my life. In fact, I go out of my way not to say that. And so I'm like, that's interesting. That was probably part of the oh shit, I got to make sure we're clear on things.
Right.
And then as I was kind of I started defining things and defining culture, what I realized is our mission statement that we just give you permission to be unabashed yourself. We came to that in 2020. Our original mission statement was something lame, but the one that we had for years was we're recklessly committed to fun, blah 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 sunglasses. And as I was thinking about the mission, I was actually had this internal quarrel with myself of, well, how does we're recklessly committed to fun, blah blah sunglasses come into play here? And as I kind of peeled back the layers, a lot of companies I see, I don't think talk about origin, or maybe origin and mission are just merged together. And as I thought about it, I'm like, man, recklessly committed to fun, blah, blah, blah sunglasses is actually step 1. It is the core base from why we started the company. And I don't feel comfortable saying our mission is we exist to give you permission to be unabashed yourself without talking about being recklessly committed to fun, blah, blah, sunglasses. It felt fundamentally wrong to me, if I'm being honest. And so as I was doing that, I was like, well, how does this work together? And I started pulling it back. And so that I'm like, well, this is our origin. I'm like, well, that's the beautiful thing when you do this work and you really get into it and you are committed to the solution. You realize you're like, well, a lot of companies don't talk about origin. We're not a lot of companies. I'm going to fucking talk about origin, and I'm going to place that strategically at the beginning because it's really important. And so once I kind of had that in place, and I'd known for a while, I'm like, hey, we have fun and authenticity, and we actually kind of have, we're recklessly committed to fun, which is a mantra we say for fun. We give you the permission to be unabashed yourself, which is basically a mantra for authenticity, right? It is. And I was like, okay, oh man, it started to become very, as I was going through, I started to be able to see the trees through the forest. I was like, fun, authenticity, fun and authenticity, core values. And then I'm a big, in the world of advertising and marketing, I'm a big Simon Sinek, golden circle, why, how, what person. And I was talking to Carrie, one of my other co-founders, while I was working on this. And I would ask a lot of people who had been here since the beginning, hey, why do you think why are we here? And she goes, well, I think that one of the reasons was from the very beginning, you always talked why, how, what. You never talked about the what, how, why. And that was really sticking with me. And so as I was thinking about that, I was like, well, as I'm laying this out, that is actually the logical way to do it. Aspirational, the why, right? Origin, mission, values, our vision. I'm like, well, that feels really great. What's nice about calling it the ethos and an aspirational is it doesn't need to be tangible. It can be aspirational. And so it gave me permission, Shaun, to then create how we behave. Because as you know, you work so hard on it. We believe in taking bullshit words like fun and authenticity and making really detailed, actionable behaviors. And I was like, okay, well, I can live here in an ethereal way, be really concrete here, And then in the book, The Advantage, like there's like companies need to know like their rules for success. And what I realized is as I started relating this, I'm like, oh man, I used to always say we're a third a product company, a third a marketing company, a third a people company. And what it's been very clear is I have been not talking about operations. It's why it's been the last one to go. In the past year, we've had a revolutionary shift from people that we brought on board who knew operations way better than this guy. And as I sat back, I was like, oh, got it. That is our foundation, which creates the sunglasses. And so that's kind of like the arch it took the whole way. And we did a version of this years ago, but that's kind of like the very high level. And it was basically pulling on a thread and then listening to what I'm saying, living into what I believe, the why, how, what, and then giving myself permission, like, oh, if I create these buckets these right way, I can distinctly talk about them differently, and they can actually all mean different things. And so that's kind of how I ended up there.
That's awesome. Well, I'm excited to talk about what each of those 4 things are. But as you were speaking, I was realizing that's like a beautiful analogy for the creative process itself, right? You're going from something aspirational that only exists kind of in your mind or in a shared space between people to something tangible that is like the end result of going from a why to a how to a what, right?
Yeah, 100%. And it's really cool where we ended up.
Totally. So just as you reflect on this, thinking about this from the perspective of someone listening in a leadership role or maybe an individual contributor role, it seems like a lot of what you're working toward here is clarity and alignment. So can you just give a perspective from each of those lenses, maybe how to go about this or what to think about along the way?
Yeah, I think you're the CEO, you're a young co-founder, whether it's 1 person, 3 people, 100 people. Man, if you just could fundamentally understand the why, and you could just basically copy everything we did here. But if you understand where you came from and vision where you're going, right? So those are really fundamentally important, I think, for the team. Understanding what your core business is. It seems lame. Like, oh yeah, obviously it's product, marketing, operations, and people. Man, if you just knew the like most places, like it's 3 things. If you just know that, it's great. And so if you are a person running a company, you can just basically redistribute what I'm saying for your team. If you run a team, you don't think about, all right, what does your team stand for? What are the values of your team? What is the anchors of your team? Making sure that people are really good at that. And if you're a person, it's the same thing, right? You're thinking, you're pulling it down. And I think if you're a person, you actually ask yourself, why are you here? But then you think, how I would use it is, I want to work for a company that knows who they are and where they're going, and I want to believe what they believe. And then once you see this, you can't unsee it, and it might lead to you finding another job, and that's okay too. But unless you're rich, don't quit your job to have another one. That's just a pro tip.
Nice. Awesome. Well, I'm really excited, Stephen. Can't wait to dive into the ethos one. Anything you want to circle back on or didn't get to cover in this chat?
Well, there's 1,000 things, but we have the whole podcast, so we'll just do another episode.
Great. Fuck it. Let's go. Cool. Well, thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode. Be excellent to each other.